What's up, guys? Francis here at Magic Mist again, and TV is on. Let's mute that. Okay. All right. Real quick today, I want to talk about a little bit of issues people experience with temp control. Now, right here, I've got the IPv4 with my nifty little snakeskin J-wrap on there. A lot of people complain about the IPv4, all this stuff with the charging port and the blah, blah, blah. I got a J-wrap from mine, and there's a hole in this sleeve that is supposed to be there for this charging port, which I have never used and intend not to use. And I don't know if you can see this, but in there, yeah, you can see it off in there. There's I covered my hole up by flipping up this section of the J-wrap upside down. And that's not going to 100% prevent things from getting down in there, juice getting down in there and stuff. But I'm just careful, I don't drip juice over onto the side and let it run down. And if that happens, this battery cover comes off fairly easy. And then I just, I wipe it. Be careful with your stuff. Yeah, there's some issues, whatever. I'm not experiencing any issues with temp control. I think 9 times out of 10 when people experience issues with temp control, it's the build. And I have done probably 30 builds now with nickel, and it's been an experience. And I think I have figured out through trial and error the best way to build in this tank. This is the Joytech Delta 2, and I have used it a handful of times before temp control. And now I'm using it in temp control mode with nickel, 28 gauge nickel wire, 15 wraps, which brings me to a 0.14. Okay, so it's 0.14. This is 50 joules. Okay, 572 degrees. It's vaping great. I mean. Now, I think maybe one of the things that people aren't considering when they're building with nickel that's really important is the wicking. If you think about it, temp control is designed to not allow the coil to get hot. And if you don't have enough juice hitting that coil, it's going to get too hot. So then you're going to be limited. Your temp control is going to limit the power going to that coil, and it's going to do that little pulsing number, that rattlesnakey kind of pulsing. And I'm not talking about the rattlesnaking that happens when you use pulse width modulation. I'm talking about the temperature limiting and it causing a slower pulse. It's more spaced out sounding than, say, like if you use the IPV Mini 2 or IPV Mini series at all, and you put it in pulse width mode and it goes, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a slower, more machine gun like pulsing. Okay, so wow, there's a lot of juice in here. So here I have a 28 gauge build, and I believe it's also 15 wraps, 16 wraps, something like that. But anyways, if I set the resistance on this, which is important that you do this at room temperature, another thing, it will not limit properly. 0.151. Okay. Now here's why I say this, because if you don't know, this is how temp control works. Nickel's properties are different than Contol's properties. And it's next to no resistance, and we know that, and we know that that's why the resistance is always so much lower. But when you apply heat to nickel, the resistance changes rapidly. It goes up. The resistance goes up. So over time, the chip is able to monitor the resistance changes and equate that to a temperature increase. Okay? So that's why it's so important to have a baseline on your temperature reading. In this scenario, as soon as I put my Addy on there, I need to make sure I reset the resistance. And if I forget to do that, then I get burnt hits. And that's because it's not measuring the temperature properly. I'm sorry. Actually, it is. It's measuring the temperature changes properly, but it's not measuring it from the correct original temperature. So that's why it's so important. So let's take a vape on this. This is a Dark Horse with an Apollo deck, because the Apollo deck has 4 posts on it. So I was able to fit the coil in there, because your nickel coils are going to be longer. So I was able to kind of center post that a little bit. And I had to move it up quite a bit to get it you know, lined up with this airflow so that I wasn't, you know, half-ass and getting a hit. So here it is, 50 joules, same settings, same resistance actually. Well, pretty close. And I mean, it's vaping pretty good. Now I've had this down to about a 0.07 before, and it will fire it. I think it says IPV Pioneer for You says that it'll fire down to 0.1, but actually it fires down lower than that. And I know I've had it down to oh wow, I got a burn there. It's hot juice. I've had it down to a 0.07, and it will fire it. However, 50 joules is not quite enough to get me the vape experience that I want at a 0.07. So I've been building around a 0.15, about the same as a sub-tank nickel coil, which I've experienced problems with those coils. They're inconsistent. The wicking isn't that great. So you experience, you know, I don't know if it's the wires shorting out inside so that it's not, it's getting hot spots, and I've tinkered with them, and so I just use the RBA section. So anyways, in this scenario, I can see, you know, I've got plenty of juice on here, and it's firing off pretty good. Now, I don't know if you can hear that little pulsing action, and actually it's getting kind of dry. So if I sit here and I fire this, okay, let's move back here so you can see. I sit here and fire this, and I start to notice that as it gets drier and drier and drier, my wattage goes down further and further. Okay, I'm not burning the cotton. It's not burning. And then when I put this on here, if I've wicked it properly, and you can't have it too tight in there, or else the juice won't wick properly, and you can't have it too loose, because then the temperature of the coil gets too hot. It's not getting enough juice. So you just kind of have it just right, and then it's going pretty well there, I would say. So if I put this cap on here, and I've played with the airflow settings, and yes, I'm using a dual airflow on a single coil. For me, I find that the more air I get, the better the vape is. Now, some people say, well, you're using so much airflow, does that negate the need for the temperature control? Aren't you using temp control so that you can control the temperature of the vape? So why would I want it to cool down my vapor? Well, that's not really what it's about for me. For me, it's about the properties of nickel. So it allows me to take longer, and I think I did a video, I think it's probably down there somewhere, about, wow, I did, you know, 20-some hits without drying it out. But I can take nice long drags, but for me, it's nickel wire has a much more powerful vapor production. So I'm getting a lot more vapor. The vapor is flavorful. I like that. I like that 572 degrees with my custardy and you know, pastry type flavors is really creating a nice developed flavor for me. And even cooling that down with the airflow, I feel like that the temperature at which it's being atomized is producing the flavor I want. Now, if you think that's silly, and I'm sure some people will, and that's okay because everybody's entitled to their opinions, then close it down a little bit. Okay, now I'm down to 2 holes. A little tighter draw. A little more flavor. Now, to me, that vape is starting to get weak, if you can believe that. I think that's crazy that to me that's now a weak vape. But so I'll put some more juice on here, you know. And I think that I did 8 drops in that video, and it got me like 20-some odd hits. And the last few were a little bit weak, but that's phenomenal flavor to me and vapor production for something. And I've had these batteries in here since yesterday sometime. And look, I've only drained it. It's like a little bit over halfway battery left because it doesn't require as much power to give me the vape that I want. So now I'm getting longer battery life out of it. To me, this is revolutionary. I don't know if anybody else. The other thing is that if your screw heads are not tightened down, and by the way, I have this build underneath. Let's see if you can see it. If you look close, you can see that my leads are not going into the post holes. My leads are trapped under the screw heads. And that's because nickel needs a really tight connection, okay? So if you use your post holes, for one, nickel's soft, so it's easy to snap the wire. And two, you don't always have the best connection using those post holes and the screws. If you're using something that has like recessed grub nuts, then usually you get a better connection. And also the shape of the bottom of that screw, typically because they have a flatter bottom. But if you're using a regular screw head and it's got like a tapered bottom, you know, and the shape is, you know, more like this or like this, then, you know, you got a better chance of snapping your wire and the connection's not going to be as solid. You want as much surface area touching that nickel on your screw head or your screw bottom as you can. So in this scenario, I have no connection issues. I have no hot spots. I'm not getting any dry or burnt hits. My cotton is not getting singed, so I'm not feeling the need to change the cotton as often either. And I've had this cotton in here for days, and it's looking brand new, you know. So my advice to people using Temp Control and are struggling with it is that make sure your connections are good and make sure that you're wicking properly, because if you're not getting enough juice, then your temperature is being limited too early and you're not getting the vape quality that you want. And to me, that's the whole entire reason I'm using Temp Control is in order to, for me, it's like, it's kind of a geeky thing, yeah, but I'm into that kind of shit, so that's just me. But as far as like me being able to customize how I vape is awesome to me. So here I'm going to screw this back on here, and again I'm going to show you. And it's been sitting this whole time, so it should be pretty cool, pretty close to, you know, like a room temperature. And let's see when we set the resistance. Let's see what it reads. What did that say? 0.14, okay? And that's where I built it at. So I'm going to fire this now. And it's phenomenal. Now I did that super long hit, not because I need to, but because I wanted to see if it was measuring properly. And it is, because I didn't get any dryness at all. The first few builds I had in here were not producing like that, and that's because the wicking in my RBA section was not good. So I'm going to show you now. And here's my RBA section in my Delta 2. Oh, and by the way, the Delta 2's airflow is a little bit tight, so I put this 2 Puffs clone on here that's got like this adjustable airflow on it, and that gives me a little bit more of an airy draw. I'm not sure if it produces more vapor. I feel like it does. You know, it's subjective there. But if I take this little cap section off of this chimney here, and you can maybe see in here, it's kind of hard to tell. You can see in here, my cotton is getting a little bit dry because my juice, let's see if I can get that to focus a little better. It's not terribly dry, but of course, this tank, I believe, this tank is like empty. It's like no juice in here. Okay, so you can see and hear that it's being limited right now. Hear that rattlesnakey sound? Okay, so if I put some juice on here, for a second it burns that drop off, and then it starts to limit again. So let's put a little bit more on here. I'll get an idea. So there it is. No rattlesnakey sound, no limiting going on. Now, I had too much cotton in here. The first, I don't know how many builds I did, or wicking jobs too. I'd build and then I'd re-wick it and re-wick it and re-wick it until finally I got down to like next to no cotton. I was afraid it was going to leak, but again, the way this deck is set up, it's really hard for it to leak. You'd really have to have a lot of juice in here for it to leak, or it'd have to be sitting on its side for hours at a time, and with any tank you risk that. But as far as like the wicking goes. Too much cotton and it doesn't wick the juice enough. And then I'm constantly getting these weak hits. They won't be burnt, but they'll be weak. And I'm like, you know. So I'll put some more juice in here. And it's a little finicky thing to fill this thing. I do this like a little turny number here like this to try and keep it from pooling up in between the chimney section. And because there's a chimney section in here. I mean, if you're not familiar with the Delta 2. You know, so you don't want it to flood right away. So I'll put this in here. Now close off my airflow here, and I'll and if I have this opened up, I'll just put my lips over it so it doesn't. Ooh. Thanks for calling Magic, Miss. This is Francis. Which coils? I'm out at the moment, but they're normally $4.99. Yeah. Yeah, I should have some in within the next couple of days, though. Alrighty. Alright, thanks. Bye-bye. Sorry about that. I have no pause feature on here. So, anyways, so I wick some juice into those coils, and here is the airflow open now. It's phenomenal. And the wicking is important. I need to make sure that I'm wicking enough juice in there. So anyways, that's just some little thoughts I have and advice about temp control. Make sure you're trapping your leads under your screw heads if it's possible. Make sure it's a nice tight connection. Don't snap the wire. If you're having hot spots, 9 times out of 10 it's the connection. If you're not getting enough vapor, 9 times out of 10 it's the wicking. Just make sure you're wicking plenty of juice to your coils. Make sure the leads are trapped properly, and temp control can be a great experience as long as you're you know, understanding what's involved, and make sure that you're setting your resistance if it's an IPv4. Others usually auto set the resistance. I think DNA 40s are the same way. You have to set the resistance when you put that new coil on, or in case of the Snow Wolf, you have to hit the up button when you put it on there and it asks you if it's a new coil. And typically it works great as long as you've done the proper efforts to make sure that that's what's going on. So anyways, thanks for watching. I just wanted to go over that real quick with you guys, and I guess that's it. I'm out.